Hello, friends. What is going on? It is Friday, May 2nd. It is time to party. All right, what's going on over here? My video. Hold on one second. It's a little cut off. I got to move myself over here. All right. There we go. I hope you're all doing well, excited, having fun today. I'm streaming on YouTube. I'm streaming on Facebook. Not Facebook. I should be streaming on Facebook. I'm not streaming on Facebook. Streaming on TikTok. All the good stuffs. I think I'm still over a little bit. There you go. I hope you're doing well. Come ask some questions. If we want to, we can do some PS or BS live as well. But I thought we'd focus on the application because it's May 2nd and AMCAS is now open, which is crazy. So I would love to chat about AMCAS if you're applying this cycle, but happy also to do some PS or BS live. Let me see what's coming in. Burley coming in hot with the questions. I've emailed my professors for letters of recommendations. They asked where to send it. I don't know the answer to that. So there's really two ways to do letters of recommendations. The first is just directly to the application service. And there's been a change with the application service this year, which was just kind of thrown out recently. I wish we would have gotten some heads up. I'll tell you about in a second. Most students, I think, just send directly to the application service. And that means you are opening your AMCAS application, right? It opened yesterday. You're going into your AMCAS application. You are then going to the letters of evaluation section. AMCAS calls it LOEs, letters of evaluation. And then you're adding new letters. So Professor Smith, Professor Johnson, Dr. whatever, right? And you are putting, the change this year is you're putting their email address in, and AMCAS and ACOMAS, similarly, will email directly the letter writer, and the process will take over from there in terms of the letter writer going into AMCAS or ACOMAS and uploading the letter directly from there. That's it. Received another interview yesterday. Awesome, Vanity Nutrition. If you need some interview help, let me know. Well, I'm happy to do some interviews with you. Volume is quite low for me here. Not sure if that's because of my own speaker. Yeah, let me know. Can you guys hear me? Usually the sounds are okay. I don't adjust my sound. But let me know. This is the second time I've been on this platform. The first time seemed to be okay. So keep me posted. So Burley, back to you. That's how letters get in the system for the majority of students, is it just goes directly into AMCAS or ACOMAS. Now that the cycle has opened up, at least for AMCAS, ACOMAS is opening up on the 3, 4, 5 on Monday. So go for it. And then a lot of students use a third-party service, meaning an outside service from AMCAS, to store the letters. And one of the benefits there is you can start collecting letters early. You don't have to wait till the application cycle opens and be stressed about it and all that stuff. The other benefit is the third-party service will QA the letter. I've heard some issues about one of the other companies in terms of their QA process. Our QA process with MyLORs, with Mapped, as part of Mapped Pro, is we look for letterhead, we look for signature, a date, contact information, and obviously to make sure the letter is specifically for you. All right, let's keep rocking. Good stuff. Calixto, I think I might get a B- C+ in Gen Bio 2. I have a B+ in Bio 1, A grades in my other prereqs so far. All right, keep pushing. Should we submit application without the MCAT score, or should we wait? There's two ways to think about this. I got into a TikTok argument with an influencer who does not Yeah. Anyway, there are two ways to think about it. The first way is submit without your MCAT score. The idea is you submit to one school so you don't have to spend extra money submitting to more schools. Wait for your MCAT score to come back. And then if it is good enough and you're like, okay, great, I'm going to push forward, you add the other schools. Adding other schools does not delay anything. It doesn't like get you back in line for re-verification or anything. It just adds more schools. Between submitting your application and waiting for your MCAT score, I would work on secondary essays as if you were applying to all of those schools. So there's no delay in secondaries. That's one way of doing it. That's the preferred method that we recommend, assuming your MCAT score, your practice tests are somewhere in the range of where you want to be. Now, if you want to score 510 and you're scoring 490s, you probably shouldn't be thinking about applying anyway, right? That's kind of a caveat to that. The other situation is you wait until you get your score back. And the issue with that is the later that you submit, the later that you're in line for verification and getting secondaries and at that whole process, right? Most medical schools work on a rolling admissions basis. So you just have to be careful there. You got to be careful there. Let me double check. I need to go over to TikTok. Sorry, my TikTok friends. I forgot it. The platform I'm using doesn't bring in the TikTok comments. So just to make sure I'm not losing out on anything. All right. Logged in. TikTok. All right. There we go. Got some questions over here too. Sorry, TikTok friends. Let me double these up. Perfect. Now I can see it all. All right. Chat. There we go. One school, why not put all the schools? Would they verify without the MCAT? Yeah, so verification, and right, this is just, you have to understand the verification. Verification has nothing to do with your MCAT score. Verification is, are your demographics in place? Are there any mistakes there? Like big mistakes, things missing that they need. And then really your transcripts, that's the verification process, is they're looking at your transcripts, they're comparing to what you put in. I don't know why that's still a manual process. It's ridiculous, whatever. So why just one school? It's to save money. If for some reason you don't score where you want to score to submit your application, it's just to save money. That's it. All right, I just started. What's the deal with transcripts, transcript request forms, AAMC instructions focus on paper transcripts? Yeah, you need the transcript request form. It can be electronic. I don't know why you're saying they focus on paper transcripts. So similar to, let me put this over here too. Got 3 different places I'm looking for comments. Similar to the, what was I thinking? Oh, putting in letters of recommendations. You have to go and put in your schools, and then you get a transcript request form, and that goes to your registrar, and you send the transcripts that way. How late would it be if I submit my primary late August? That is very, very late, and I'm trying not to use the word late or early anymore. It is a much higher risk to submit your application in August. Much, much higher risk. So take that as you will. If you're like, whatever, I'm going to do it, go for it. How many schools would you recommend to apply to when we don't have the MCAT score? One school. Just put in one school, get in line for verification, all of that fun stuff. When you get your score back, add the other schools. Again, it's just a money-saving strategy. For some reason, if you don't score where you want to score and you're like, oh, shoot, I'm not ready to apply this cycle, then you haven't donated more money to the AAMC. Let's try everything in our power to stop donating unnecessary funds to the AAMC. So If you only apply to one school when you submit your application, you get your MCAT score, and you're like, holy crap, it's not where I want to be. You just remove yourself from the application process, and then you're done. You don't have to worry about wasting more money on the schools. If your score comes back and it's where you want it to be, awesome. Add more schools. It's not delaying anything. I think you guys are fearing the fact that if you add more schools, it's going to delay your application. It won't delay your application. You obviously won't be at the medical schools yet because you haven't added those schools to your list, but you don't have to get re-verified. There's no more getting in line. Once your application is verified, you add more schools to it. All it does is allows those other schools to now come get your application. And now you will start to get those secondaries. And ideally, again, you're working on the secondaries while waiting for your MCAT score so that you can pretty quickly turn in secondary essays. That is the strategy. 3.6 overall GPA in master's good compared to 3.2 overall in undergrad. It's better. It's better. The question is, when is it good enough? And that's just an impossible question to answer. So it's good enough. Now the question is, what is the master's? I don't know what your master's is in. So there's lots of caveats there as well. If you have FAP, does that automatically mean the disadvantaged box will be clicked on the application? Good news. Good news, friends. There is no more disadvantaged essay. The disadvantaged essay went away 2 years ago. Now there's an essay called the Other Impactful Experiences essay. And I was at a conference last week, 2 weeks ago, listening to a friend from the AAMC give a talk, and they are saying that more people are designating and writing the Other Impactful Experiences essay versus the disadvantaged essay, which is perfect. That's the whole goal of it. So no, even previously, being on FAP would not automatically check that box, but that box doesn't exist anymore because the disadvantage is no longer there. If you got below a 500 on the MCAT, how much better do you need to score on the second try to apply? Do you need to do significantly better, or would a 502, 503 still qualify you for some schools? A 500 would qualify you for some schools. So it's an impossible question to answer. I will tell you, again, that the same conference I was at, the AAMC, did mention that the average increase is only 2 or 3 points. That's not a lot. So basically, students who struggle, and it's not even struggle, right? You could go from a 510 to a 512 or 513. But students who need to retake the test generally don't score significantly better in general, right? And a lot of that is just study habits and other issues there. 3.5 undergrad, 3.2 science, 3.6 master's GPA, medical physiology, 497 MCAT. Yeah, I mean, those numbers aren't great overall. Specifically, your MCAT score, 3.6 in your master's doing medical physiology is better than a 3.2. It's okay. That 497 is going to hinder you from most schools. How do you feel about pre-accredited medical schools? So, preliminary accreditation, which is I know COCA and LCME for DO and MD schools, they use a little bit of a different language. But if schools have some sort of preliminary accreditation, they are perfectly fine to go to. They can't get their full accreditation until they graduate. They're in their fourth year, graduating their first class. Do you need to include international grades on an application currently doing a master's? Sometimes no, sometimes yes. You really just have to go read the application guide, the instruction manual, and see if your situation applies. What score and above would you say is worth it to still apply this cycle? Would you say above 500? It's such a personal answer, right? Every student is in a different situation, a different risk tolerance, different level of financial situation to be able to be like, oh, I'm just going to try. You don't realize how many students are just like, I'm just going to try. They have a 492. I'm just going to see what it's like. don't do that. I don't know. There's no good number to say above 500 apply, below 500 don't. It really just depends on the student, what your expectations are, where you want to go. Are you applying MD and DO? It's hard, yeah. I'm a pre-accredited medical school. This year they have dismissed 30 first-year students and failed 50% of the class in MSK. Yeah, to me, that has nothing to do with pre-accreditation. That just has to do specifically with that school, the curriculum, the professors, the admissions process, maybe admitting students that they shouldn't have admitted. That's just that's just crappy. But that isn't a right. Correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because they don't have their full accreditation doesn't mean that's the same experience everywhere. All right, so many good questions. How many schools do you recommend applying to? I answered that one already. What's the thing about submitting your primary to only one school? I've talked about that a ton already. How should the other impactful experiences essay be written up? Is it in your guide to the application book? No, they changed that like as soon as I released the book, unfortunately. And updating books is hard. I've talked about it before. I think it's exactly the same as the disadvantage essay, actually. I think of them the same way. They are there to add context to your application. So the other impactful experiences essay, I don't think should be, I didn't get into med school the first time, so here's why. It really should be, here is my life situation that may add context to something you're going to read later in my application. Whether that's context for the personal statement, context for the activities, context for grades, anything like that adds context, ideally is what I think it should be focused on. How much does GPA matter if course load is low? 12 credits. Well, 12 credits is, that's full time, right? I don't know why there's this assumption that you have to do 15 or 18 credits to matter. Ultimately, your GPA matters. End of story. Super mid stats, but 10 years of clinical experience in a career. Is September too late to apply? September is horribly risky to apply. The first question I have to ask you all, thinking about late August, September, is why is that even a possibility? Right? You have to ask yourself, why am I even thinking about that as the date? The application opened yesterday. You can submit your AMCAS application May 27th. Schools get your application June 27th, or have the ability to start getting your application June 27th. Now you have July, August, September. A lot of primary deadlines in are October. We cannot be thinking about August, September, October for submitting a primary application. That just should not be in our thought process. And I know a lot of it is just you're not familiar with rolling admissions, right? Because undergrad admissions is not that. But you have to understand that rolling admissions is impactful. Now, unfortunately, we don't have good data to show how impactful it is because it's not in the best interest of the AAMC to give us that data. They want students applying from day one to day zero, to the end of time, right? To the deadline. It's in their best interest to continue to gather application fees for as long as possible. If they released data that showed students submitting June, July, August, maybe a little bit earlier in August, they had the highest percentage of interviews and the highest percentage of acceptances. And people who submitted end of August, September, October had a much, 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 much smaller chance of getting in and getting interviews, right? Anecdotally, I think that's the data. I've seen some data from TMDSAS that shows that. It's not public information, though. if the AAMC released that information, that would hopefully lead students to go, you know what, I didn't prepare properly going into this cycle. I'm just going to wait until next cycle. That would financially hurt the AAMC. So they will not share that information. That's just the way it is. So you have to listen to us to understand the risk of applying later and later and later in the cycle. Now, are you okay with that risk? Are you okay with the financial investment, the emotional investment, the time investment to apply later, knowing that it is riskier? Great, go for it. That's your decision. But understand the risks of applying later. When you said that adding schools, you guys love this topic of adding schools and one school. When you said adding schools after getting your MCAT score won't delay your app, is it ever too late to add a school? I'm asking because I'm retaking my MCAT late June. To me, late June is the perfect time. To me, late June is the perfect last time to take the MCAT, because then you're getting your MCAT score back late July. Well, what else is happening late July? Let's look at that. All right. I wish I had a good graphic to show. I have it somewhere, but in this current setup, I can't show it. Medical schools aren't, and I'm speaking specifically AMCAS here because that's the majority of applications, right? So forgive me for being kind of AMCAS specific. Medical schools aren't getting applications until June 27th. That's the first time they have access to applications. You do not need to be in the first wave of applications. There's this thought that medical schools just go in on June 27th, pull whatever applications are there, and then never look again. That just isn't true. They start to have access on June 27th. They go back at whatever frequency they have set up for their process and go and pull more applications as they come. So June 27th, they start to get their applications. Most schools reflexively, without screening, will send secondary applications. So the secondary applications go out. You figure a few weeks to turn those around, right? So now we're pushing into mid-July by the time that secondary applications are back. Mid-July by the time secondary applications are back. So now medical schools are like, okay, I have a primary application, I have secondary applications. Do I have all of my letters of recommendations? If you're using a committee letter, a lot of committees don't submit their letter of recommendation, their committee letter, until mid-August. It's mid-July right now. So you have your primary in, your secondary in, maybe you have your letters of recommendation in. So your application is incomplete because it doesn't have your MCAT score. Your MCAT score is only coming back in 2 weeks. So a late June MCAT score is not hindering your application, assuming you have your application in. So, yeah. So can you add a school too late? Yeah, I mean, it's the same timeline. I just don't want you to think about if you submit your application and now it's like 4 weeks later until the school gets it. They'll get it near immediately within the next few days, maybe a week, because it's them going into the system and pulling this data. Yeah, Kay, if you're 497, you need to focus on your MCAT. That's your kryptonite right now. If I'm applying DO late August, is that going to hinder me? DO timelines are later. The DO schools are more desperate. Sorry, I tell them that too. I have a friend who's now the director of undergraduate education at ACOM, and I tell him, I'm like, you guys are coming off very desperate right now. So yeah, the DO timeline's different. Don't worry about it. My sister received 7 interview invites after December from DO school, so I question your logic. Question my logic all you want. Like I just said, DO timelines are very different. DO schools are much more desperate right now. They extended the deadlines for DO schools this past cycle because of how desperate they are right now. And it's not to say that going to a DO school is bad. There's just some issues going on with DO schools and applications and numbers and all that stuff. You don't need to ask me any more questions if you question my logic. So I'll answer some other people's questions first. You're allowed to question my logic. I'm allowed to be wrong. I sometimes am wrong. I don't remember the last time I was wrong, but I'm just kidding. All right. As an international applicant, what GPA is good to comfortably apply with? To me, I don't put international students in a different bucket. The biggest hindrance for international students is just your ability to apply to fewer schools. Now, each individual medical school is going to have a potentially different process for how they view international applicants. Some just kind of put you in the normal pool, right? Everyone's in a normal pool. In-state, out-of-state, international, you're just a typical student. Some will require you or their process will kind of somewhat require you to have higher stats, but I wouldn't think about it that way. Do as best you can on your GPA. Do as best you can for your MCAT. Do all the other things. My daughter has 300 clinical hours and an MA job offer this summer. Do med schools value expected hours? They want to see that, I think, right? They want to see that you're continuing to get some experiences, but it's not the hours that matter. It's the experience that the student has that they're then able to reflect on and then able to write about and talk about for their applications and interviews. That's the goal of hours and the experiences. It's not just collecting the time. Do you know if a COMIS applications can be submitted the day they open or later? Yeah, so COMIS a couple years ago changed their process. Again, desperation. They can now, you can submit your application day one. You can start to get secondaries day one. You can start to get interview invites day two, like day one, whatever. We're also seeing and you will probably see students applying this next cycle, so May 5th, who will get interview invites for last year's cycle. That's crazy, but it's been happening. So watch out for that too. Wow, I didn't know you grew hair. I've always had hair. I just keep it really short. I have pretty good hairlines. I just keep it really short. Because I have thick hair and it's wavy and thick and just uncontrollable. So, yeah, a lot of people and this is my normal kind of length. Whatever. Tracy, I'm an RN and will be applying this year. Low nursing GPA but high science GPA. Yeah, without really going into kind of full details of what that looks like, I don't know what recommendations to give you. The fact that your science GPA is high is great. What is a low nursing GPA? Because nursing GPA is science. A lot of those classes are science classes. They just aren't prereqs. So maybe, I don't know if you're confusing prereqs with science GPA. So there's potentially some conversation there. Have you ever had a full beard? No. Unfortunately, right, I grow plenty of hair up here, but I don't grow a lot of hair like sideburn-wise. So no. Ram, OMG, Dr. Gray, your last couple of months of pre-med years have been so inspiring. Awesome. So pre-med years, if you don't know, is the podcast I've been doing for almost 600 episodes now. I started it in 2012. I recorded 2 great episodes yesterday. We've been a little inconsistent with releasing them. The goal is getting a lot more consistent, so stay tuned. I have 3 episodes the next 3 weeks ready to rock and roll. If you have any suggestions for guests or topics for the pre-med years, would love to hear. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever. I got a C at community college, retook there. I had extreme life circumstances during the time. I remember you said it was possible to do a withdrawal after. Potentially. So there are ways to potentially apply for a late withdrawal. It just depends on the institution. Could you do more traditional student interviews in the pre-med years? Yeah, I would love to do more. A lot of times the good stories are just non-trads, and it's not that I'm seeking them out specifically. They just have better stories than, yeah, undergrad was easy. Yeah, I did well. did all my things, wasn't super stressful. Yeah, I applied to med school once. It was easy. Didn't have any problems, right? That doesn't make for a good story, right? It's like Superman without kryptonite. Like, that just doesn't work. Upward trend, 3.34 sophomore GPA, 3.8 this semester in EMT training, no shadowing yet, photo business. Light volunteering, psych degree, any recommendations? Not enough, just based on that. Like, our recommendations are super nitty gritty, so we need to go really into detail. So I don't know what else to tell you. Need more, right? You're saying you're in EMT training. The EMT training is pretty useless. You need to work as an EMT or volunteer as an EMT. You need some shadowing, ideally. Are you taking gap year? Are you not taking gap year? There's lots of questions there. Will publishing a patient case report as a first author be helpful for a DO application? It won't be helpful for DO, won't be helpful for MD. It's just something to put on your application. It does not overcome. Let me as specific as I can get here. Your activities will not overcome low stats. Your activities, you cannot think of your activities as overcoming low stats. Now, I was gonna come into here and do a fun little little zoom. Your activities will not overcome low stats. Okay, there, do my little zoom effect. It's a very common thought that students have of, I'm struggling with my GPA, but I've been a nurse, I've been an EMT, I've done all these cool, amazing things, and because of that, my activities, my extracurriculars will overcome my low stats. First and foremost, medical schools have to be confident that you are going to pass medical school. They have to be confident that you are going to get through medical school, pass your boards, and graduate ideally in 4 years, because they're graded on that stuff. They're judged on that. And so if there is concern about your ability to do well in medical school and pass medical school, they're not even going to get to your activities. They're not going to go, well, I know this person only has a 2.0 GPA, but geez, look, they have 10,000 hours of community service and volunteering and EMT, and they have 3 publications, all first author. They don't care about that, and they shouldn't care about that, because you haven't proven your ability to do well in medical school. So they are doing a disservice to you by allowing you to start medical school, get loans for medical school, and then potentially fail out. Now you have debt. Now you've started school, and it's going to be very, very, very hard to restart medical school once you're kicked out. I was talking to a parent the other day. Kids started medical school, struggled for whatever reasons, failed their first kind of block or semester, whatever you want to call it, retook, passed the first block, got to the second block, failed the second block, and then basically was told to leave and is in a period of, do I quit or am I kicked out, right? You can resign or I'll fire you. Same situation. That student wants to try to go back to medical school, but going back to medical school after proving they couldn't handle medical school is going to be a really, really hard task to accomplish. So the question ultimately that you're all asking now is, what's considered low? And that's the magic, right? I wish there was a magic formula out there that I could say, these stats are okay and these stats are not. A lot of it depends on the medical school. And I've been having these conversations a lot with medical schools about, like, hey, you accept students with a 498. You accept students with a 3.2. Why do you do that, but this other school has a 505 cutoff or a 3.5 cutoff? And the answer really comes down to, number one, what is their mission? Number two, Do they know kind of location-wise where they're at? There are some schools that just aren't in ideal locations where students don't want to go to those spots. So they have to lower their requirements to get more students to apply. But the biggest thing is the schools that potentially accept lower stats know that they may need to provide more support for those students, and they have that support structure built, and they're willing to support those students. That is the biggest reason that schools have these different ranges of MCAT scores, GPAs that they'll accept. Is there are schools that know, like, hey, we're in this for the student. We're going to support them. And we know that there's going to be some students that we accept with some lower stats for whatever reason. They struggled with their MCAT, their GPA, whatever. We know that we're prepared to support them through medical school as well. We have a good academic office. We have good tutors. We have all the good support structure to help them. So what is this? What is too low? I don't know. And here's where I always talk about, if you guys are throwing out numbers, right? I have a 3.8. Obviously a 3.8's solid. We don't have to worry about 3.8. Probably don't have to worry about a 3.7. 3.5 is the number I always like to talk about, because if you have a 3.5, what does that mean? What does that mean? Let's assume you've graduated. You've been through 4 years. You had the same number of credits every single year. A 3.5 GPA could be 3.5 every single year. That shows that you're a 3.5 student. No better, no worse. But it also potentially shows that you weren't really interested in getting better, maybe. Or you tried, but you couldn't. A 3.5 GPA also could be someone starting out at a 4.0 first 2 years and then dropping down to a 3.0 their last 2 years. That's a pretty bad downward trend. So that 3.5 is very different than 3.5 straight across. You also could have the reverse of the downward trend. You could have the upward trend where students started off slow, 3.0 freshman year, 3.0 sophomore year, but then finished strong, theoretically, in mostly science classes, theoretically in those upper division science classes for those junior, senior years, and they figured it out. Now they have a 3.0, 3.0, 4.0, 4.0. That 3.5 is a very different number. And what you have to remember is that medical schools see all of the data. And depending on their process and what they care about, they can use that data to go, you know what, this is a 3.5 student, but oh my gosh, that upward trend is amazing. Let's talk to them. I'm not concerned about that 3.5 because of the upward trend. They could also go, hey, I don't really care about your upward trend. Your 3.5 is below my cutoff of 3.6. We don't know those numbers. And that's just kind of the crazy process. I would love if there was more transparency in this process. Unfortunately, there's not. I don't know. Najadal. I have a 3.2, but I'm applying for a master's to do better. Again, a 3.2 could be perfectly fine if your last 40 or 50 credits are near a 4.0. That's why, to me, if you're like, hey, I have a 3.2, what should I do? My first answer is, I don't know. I need to know more information about what that 3.2 looks like. Mainly targeting MD schools, also DO. However, I don't understand DO timelines. When should I submit my DO app? So to me, don't worry about DO timelines. Focus on the MD application. Submit your DO application as soon as possible after that. The timeline for DO doesn't matter nearly as much. Scribing in the ER is my only clinical experience. Is that an issue? Potentially, right? It's just, for some schools may not like it. Other schools perfectly fine with it. Do you have to retake a C-? For prereqs, most schools do not consider, if not all schools, do not consider C- passing for prereqs. Mo, can we ask questions in this chat? No. Yes. What's up, Adrian? Our friend Adrian, Staff Sergeant to MD, PhD. Non-trad means you have a story to share. Heck yeah. Took Casper, but I'm not taking Duet. However, I read it will mark my app as incomplete. Any insight into this? If a medical school requires Duet, then yeah, it'll be incomplete. I don't know specifically of any med schools that require Duet, but they may. I just don't know of any. Can you talk more about the changes to my LORs, if it'll affect application submission? No. So I talked earlier, probably before most of you were on, AMCAS has changed their letter process this year for letters of recommendation, which changes how we at Mapped and my LORs, if you're using my LORs to store letters, which the benefit is you can start collecting them early, and we QA them to make sure it has letterhead, signature, date, contact information. Our process is broken because of the new AMCAS process. So we're already working on the process. We're talking to the people at AMCAS just to make sure everything works. Our ideal timeline is hopefully in the next 2 weeks or so to have those fixes in place, which won't delay application. You can't submit your MCAS application until May 27th anyway. And even if for some reason we can't get the fixes in by May 27th, you can still submit your application May 27th, assuming you want to. You don't have to. There's zero need to submit your application May 27th. You can submit without those letters of recommendations, and we'll get it fixed as soon as possible. So shouldn't be any issues. Just kind of a pain in the butt. Sorry about that. Sean, hi Dr. A, how you doing? I'm doing well. Friend has a 2.9 GPA with upward trend. Great extracurriculars, research, shadowing, working with Harvard on tribal lands, volunteer, building capacity on health programs as a gap year. Great. Is there a question there? I don't see a question. All right. What will med schools think if one of my professors wrote a LOR, I got a B in their course? Yeah, this is a very common question. Your LORs do not have to come from professors where you got A's. Your LORs should come from, number one, people to meet the requirements for the LORs for that school. And number two, from people who know you well. The professor's letter of recommendation doesn't mean anything if it's just like, hey, this student got an A, right? They can see that from the transcript. But if the professor was like, hey, the student got a B in my class, but you know what? They really struggled. They came to every office hours, and by the end of the semester, they were tutoring other students. That shows more about who you are than you got an A. So don't worry about letters of rec and getting A's. Those are not equal. All right. Let's keep rocking. Do you know how adding one school first for verification works if you have fee assistance program? Works the same. You can add more later if you have fee assistance. Should I add in that I got a mindfulness micro credential from school in my activity section? I wouldn't. And I potentially would put mindfulness as a hobby if that maybe is what you want to do. But I wouldn't put a specific micro credential. Gabriel. Hey, Dr. Gray, I have a 501 MCAT 3.9 GPA, wondering if it's worth adhering to MD schools with their 700 character activities or focus on my 600 character DO apps, New York State resident. Again, it's an impossible question to answer. My general recommendation is apply both to MD and DO. A 501 will probably keep you out of a lot of MD schools, but you never know. There's a lot more information I would need to understand. My general recommendation is write the 700 for AMCAS and then figure out how to cut 100 for ACOMAS. Brandon, back to your question. 2.9 upward trend, extracurricular shadowing, blah, blah, blah. Should they apply? I don't know. There's not nearly enough information there to tell you that. I would love to give you some more information, but this is where there just needs to be more information. I have to dig in a little bit more. Congress legislation affecting Grad Plus loans. I haven't paid enough attention to what's going on with the loans and everything in this process, so I'm ignorant to provide an answer there. My daughter has a master's in biomedical technology. She is trying to go to medicine. Okay, what's the question? 200 clinical hours, but over 4,000 research hours with publications, presentations. Said I only apply to top heavy schools. GPA 4.0, MCAT June 28th. So Nord, all right, let's get serious for a minute. The number one mistake that we see students make, in our opinion, right? This is just our opinion. And just to give you some feedback, if you don't know, again, who I am or what my credentials are for being on here and giving advice, I know nothing about the process. I knew nothing about the process. I grew up in a household with a mom and stepdad who didn't graduate high school. I had to figure out the process on my own. I didn't do it well. I had to apply to medical school twice. But what I have done over the last 12 years now is I have surrounded myself with deans and directors of admissions, deans of medical schools. I can text them, call them. I hang out with them at conferences. I go to the AAMC conference, all of the pre-health advisor conferences. I'm learning with them. I'm talking to these people. I also have a team of advisors, right? I'm the boss of a company. I have a team of advisors who are former directors of admissions, who have collectively read probably hundreds of thousands of applications, made decisions on tens of thousands of applications. What's good, what's bad, what's wrong, what's right, in their opinion. And we, right, they're on my team, so we collectively have a very general picture of what makes a good applicant. And for us, the biggest mistake that students make year in and year out is having way too much research and not enough or no clinical experience. We talk to students every year, 4.0 GPAs, near perfect MCAT scores, thousands of hours of research, minimal clinical experience, not getting any interviews. Not getting any interviews. Near perfect stats or perfect stats, but a research-heavy application with not enough clinical or no clinical. Because the downstream effect of not enough clinical or no clinical is your essays are going to be bad. Again, in our opinion of what makes a good essay. In our opinion, a good essay is, why do you want to be a doctor? Show me through your experiences why interacting with patients and impacting their lives through healthcare is something that you want to do and is motivating you. That, for us, is what makes a good essay. And when we look at your extracurricular activities and we see that you're surrounding yourself with patients and you're shadowing and being around physicians, you have and are showing an interest in healthcare, in taking care of patients. And when we see really smart students with tons of research and not enough clinical, the initial reaction for a lot of schools these days is this person has not proven to themselves that they want to be a physician. They've only proven so far that they're smart enough to be a doctor and they really like science and research. We have school for that. It's called graduate school, where you can go get your PhD. So the biggest mistake we see year in, year out, students going, I have no idea what happened. Why didn't I get in? And we look at their application. You haven't gotten clinical experience in 5 years. I talked to 2 people this week that want to apply this cycle. They haven't been involved in clinical experience in 5 years. If I tell you that I'm the biggest fan of the Colorado Rockies, right where I live, I'm the biggest fan of the Colorado Rockies, and you go and you check my browser history, and I've never searched for the Rockies, I've never gone and looked at their scores. You looked. I've never been to a game. I know nothing about the Rockies. I'm lying, right? That's what medical schools are doing. Your actions speak louder than your words. And there are too many students who start medical school who realize they're in the wrong place because they don't actually want to take care of patients. They just like the science of medicine. So, to the question, right? 4.0, haven't taken the MCAT yet, thousands of hours of research, but only 200 of clinical. That could be a very big problem. So, should you only apply to top-heavy schools? I don't even know what that means. I don't know what that means. Is shadowing considered clinical? No, that's a huge mistake that, again, we see year in and year out. Clinical is interacting with patients. Shadowing in some sort of clinical-ish way, not admin way. That's a big differentiator, right? If you're front desk admin checking in patients, that's not clinical experience. That's admin work. So you have to just use your brain, use some critical thinking and go, is this really clinical? I don't know. If someone told me they were a Rockies fan, I would believe them because they are horrible. They've won 2 in a row, baby. They've won 2 in a row. I was at the game on Wednesday with my daughter for a field trip. And they won that game. That was their 5th win. And then they won yesterday on the road in San Francisco. Don't ask me how I know because I'm really not a Rockies fan. But anyway, I don't know where I was at. So clinical. Shadowing is passive. Shadowing is literally just hanging out, watching what the doctor's doing. They are different. And only, right, because the categories are different on the application. We also find that, again, I mentioned earlier, the goal of these hours and these experiences is to have the experience so you can think about it, you can reflect on it, you can write about it, you can talk about it in your interviews. And we find that students who have mostly shadowing and not clinical, they're not interacting with the patients, the essays read like, hey, Dr. Smith did this, Dr. Smith did that, Dr. Smith was awesome, Dr. Smith showed compassion, Dr. Smith showed empathy, Dr. Smith is caring, Dr. Smith took care of the patient, Dr. Smith was holistically taking care of the patient. I want to be like Dr. Smith. That's what the essay reads like. And there's zero authenticity for the student. I have learned nothing about the student. The letter is basically a love letter to Dr. Smith. That's what happens when students write about shadowing in their personal statement. Will my application be screened if I have a C minus? C minus in prereqs. Again, C minus for prereqs is generally considered not passing. So you would have to take, recommended, to retake a C minus for a prereq. 1 second. All right. So will it automatically be screened out? No, but they will expect you to retake it, and hopefully you retake it really soon so that you can show that you are retaking it. And potentially, ideally, on the application, show it as a current class that just doesn't have a grade yet. All right. Hopefully this has been helpful. Again, I want to go live more. I love I love these. If you can't tell, like I love answering your questions and doing this. And then if you saw a couple weeks ago, or maybe a week ago or so now, I did a live PS or BS. PS or BS is a series that we have on YouTube. Medical School HQ is our YouTube channel, where we review personal statements and give feedback. So you can go watch those and kind of understand how we give feedback. I can do that live now, and you can submit stuff anonymously, and we can review. So I won't do that today. Maybe later today. I don't know. If you guys are around later today, maybe I'll do. I got a lot of work to do, my friends. I'm super excited. We have a new advisor joining us part-time as well, former director of admissions and dean of admissions at Upstate, which is awesome, SUNY Upstate. Is there a way to incorporate patient care as well as environmental science? I'm not sure, Nate. I think the question is, what is the goal? Often our feedback when we're reading essays and talking to students is, don't force your agenda where it doesn't belong. And so I would be potentially careful with that. All right. I see a note from my team member. They liked the Rockies analogy. I don't know where I came up with that. Do you need a log of your activities? Yeah, you need your activities. Mapped, mappd.com. It's free to track all of your activities. Most importantly, to journal your activities so you understand what it meant to you, what you felt, all the emotions around it, so that when you do apply in a year or 2 or 3, it's all there. Michaela, let's finish on this. Any encouragement for people about to apply? Here's where I like to get into my rah-rah mode. It's funny because I'm not really a super positive person. I think my team member would tell you I very much am a kind of, I pick apart lots of things. The medical school application process is daunting. I think at the end of the day, you have to understand that you're applying to school. You're not applying for your soul. Too many people put their identity into being a pre-med student, into being a medical student, into being a doctor. This is the next step in your journey and education to eventually be a physician, which all of you here theoretically want to do, or your kids want to do if you're a parent. You have to understand that perfection is not the goal. A straight line path is unobtainable for most people. And your specific journey may look different than everyone else around you. So put your head down. Don't worry about what everyone else is doing. Do the best that you can do. Prepare the best application possible for you, and hope that that's good enough. Now, obviously, you have to have some kind of common expectations. If you have a 2.0 GPA and you have a 490 MCAT score, you're not going to get into medical school, right? The question is, what do you have, and is that good enough? And it's really hard to answer on these lives with just a little bit of information that you give us. If you want to meet with one of our advisors, go to medicalschoolhq.net, go get a single session for 30 minutes or 50 minutes and really lay everything out to them and go, here's where I'm at. We have a tool called the Readiness Report Card that is coming. Most of it's done. There's a bunch of stuff on the back end that I still need to work on, so we can send you kind of a custom report on what is missing. And that will be free for you to use and go, am I good enough here? Am I missing something? But understand at the end of the day, if you don't get into medical school, that's okay, right? Most students every year are not getting into medical school. And if this is what you want, you figure out why you didn't get in, you fix those things, and you reapply. I had to apply twice to medical school. There was a lot I didn't know about the process. I fixed it. I moved forward. I got in, and I got one school to say yes to me. And that's all it takes. So go through this process. Do the best you can and understand it's stressful. It's a long process. There's lots of waiting and watching, and you'll see your friends start celebrating. And just know that your time will come.